What's up, friends of YouTube? Derek Van Diest here with Zaandam Music. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the beat Sonder. We're going to see how I made it, which instruments I used, how I arranged it, and also the mix process. So let's get right into it. Okay, so I'm going to start by playing the beat one time through so that we can hear the beat. Alright, and that's the beat that we're going to be taking a look at. So first thing, let's look at all the instruments that I used. So let's start with the 808. So for the 808, I used 3 different patterns. Make this a little easier to see. I used 3 different patterns throughout, and this is the 808 I used is from Contact, and I'll pull it up here real quick for you guys. I used the 808 Cooking Up from the Beat House Kit's Trap Sinatra, and this is a really nice 808. This whole kit is really nice. It's the Beat House Kit's Trap Sinatra for Contact, and this is what it sounds like. Okay, so that's the 808 that I used. Now moving on to the drums. So for the drums, I used a kick, and I used an instance of sample 1 with a Lil Skies kick. It's from a sample pack, and this is what the kick sounds like. And I used 2 different patterns for the kick. Alright, I also used a clap sound, and I used an instance of sample 1 with a Lil Skies clap. So this is what it sounds like. Okay, so I also used a snare. This is from a sample one. I used a Nick Myra stock snare. This is what it sounds like. Okay, I also used another snare, so this is a different snare. On sample one, I used a snare from a sample pack. I don't remember which one it was. This is what it sounds like. Okay, so after that, I used a hi-hat, and I used a sample one. I put a Lil Skies hi-hat. This is what it sounds like. And this has two patterns. Okay, actually that's 4 patterns I used here. 1, 2, 3, and 4 throughout, and I'll explain that in more detail later. Alright, so up next I have an open hat. And I'm using a sample one with a Lil Skies open hat. And this is what it sounds like. Okay, I'm also using a perk sound. And I'm using a sample one with a Lil Skies perk. This is what it sounds like. Alright, so now I'm going to show you what all the drums sound like together. This is for the verse. And this is for the hook. This is with the 808. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on to the next part. So now let's take a look at the pianos that I used. So I have a chords sample that I got from a pack, and I don't remember which pack it was, but this is what it sounds like. It's just a simple chord progression, and it plays throughout. It's an A minor, I believe, chord progression. Okay, so that very same sound, I reversed it and I put it underneath, so I titled that the reverse layer. And this is what the reverse sounds like. Okay, so when both of those sounds are played together, this is what they sound like. It's the same sound, one's reversed and the other's not. This is what they sound like together. Alright, so those are the chords and the reverse chords. Now I also have a Rhodes piano, and for this Rhodes I'm using an instance of Keyscape, and I'll show you as soon as it pops up here. Alright, so I'm using Rhodes 1946 pre-piano from Keyscape. And this is what it sounds like. Alright, and I also used a Celeste piano, and this is also from an instance of Keyscape, and I'll pull it up here shortly. Alright, this is what it looks like. It's the Celeste Wash Infinite. So here's what the Celeste sounds like. Alright, and those are all the piano sounds that I used. So let's move on to the pads. I only used one pad sound, and I'll pull it up here shortly. I believe I used Omnisphere for this one. Here it is. Alright, so I used pads and strings. I used the Wheezing Fairlight preset. And this is what it sounds like. Okay, so that's the pad sound that I used. And for the flute, I used an enchanted flute, which is one of my favorite sounds from Omnisphere. And I'll pull it up here shortly. So it's from... Oh, I did a search. I don't know which pack it's in, but it's called Enchanted Flute. And this is what it sounds like. Alright, and that's the flute. So last we have the effects, and I used a riser from the Razer VST, and I used the tonal noise sweep preset. And this is what the riser sounds like. Okay, and the last effect I used is a beat tag. It's the one I always use, and this is what it sounds like. Alright, and those are all the instruments that I used. So now we're going to hop into the arrangement and see exactly how I went about arranging this beat. So I'm going to open up all the folders, and I just want to talk about something I do here on all my beats for all the people who are just tuning in for the first time. Let me just arrange this real quick. Okay, so if you can see here, I have some grayed out sections that are just kind of transparent. Those are the MIDI sections. So these are the MIDI notes that I programmed for each instrument. As you can see, I have one here for the snare, whatnot. I have one here for the perk. So what I did is I bounced it to WAV files for each one. And that's to save up some space on my CPU, and as well for the same reason as for tracking out at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and hide all those just to make some room. So I'm going to open up the mixer. Okay, and I'm just going to turn off those instruments. And that's going to make it easier to see. Alright, so let's get into the arrangement. So we have an intro, a hook, a verse, a hook, a verse, a hook, and an outro. And the song is about 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. So it starts off with the main instrument, the chords. We're playing the chords with the pad and strings and the enchanted flute. And that's how we start the beat. Let me just play that real quick. Alright, and so we start very slow here, and we're going to go straight into the hook. So the 808 is going to jump in with the kick and snare B. So let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so the kick, snare B, and then later on the open hat and the second half of the hook. And we have the perk coming in as well. So everything except this open hat, which is going to be in the verse. And the hi-hat also changes patterns. So pattern 1 and 2 for the hook, patterns 3 and 4 for the verse. Okay, so that's for the drums. Now for the hook part, we're still on the first hook. We have the chords playing continuously, so it's continuing from the intro. And then we also introduce that reverse sound as well to accompany the chords. Then on the second half of the hook, we add the 1946 Rhodes. And we also have a riser effect to transition to the verse. So the flute stops here as well. The flute was only on the intro, so the flute picks up on the verse. So let's start from the hook here and transition into the verse and see what that sounds like. And these are two separate patterns for the hi-hat. So that transition was done with the riser. And when we go to the verse, I have a different 808 pattern going, and a different kick pattern. So we also have a different snare as well. So something unique I did on this beat is I have two different snares. One snare plays in the hook and the other in the verse. This is what the two snares sound like. And you'll see how different they are. So that's a little trick I did there for this beat. The clap is the same throughout, but I only have the clap on the verse. So it's a different pattern on the hook and the verse when it comes to the drums. For the chords and the pianos and all that, I have it placed in a way so that it's not too overbearing, and it also switches it up throughout. So it's not the same thing, you know, for a whole 2 minutes and 40 seconds. The pads and strings are the same pattern all the way through, just playing over and over just to accompany. And the flute only plays in the verse sections, the outro, and the intro. The only time the flute isn't playing is in the hook, because it would be just too much if I included it. The beat tag is only one time in the beginning, and I'm just gonna mute it. I always turn it off before mastering. Alright, and this is a really simple beat. I did not use any automation, just a standard beat with verse, hook, and intro and outro. Alright, so with that, let's get into the mix process. So I'll open up the mixer here. Alright, and let's start with all the effects that I used. So I have the standard plate reverb that I always use, the same one. Valhalla Vintage Verb drum plate setting. For the hall reverb, I'm using Valhalla Vintage Verb Very Nice Hall. And for the room, I'm using Altiverb 7, the SARM West Studio preset. For the effects, I have a pan man, and I'll get into which ones are being panned. This is for some more stereo width. I also have an Echo Boy effect, and I'm running the Dense Organ Room preset, and I'll show you later on which one's using that. Okay, for the bus channels, I have a bass bus channel, and all it has is the room reverb. That's for the 808, this channel. For the drum channel, I have a virtual mix rug. This is from Slate Digital, and I'm going to be using Slate Digital throughout the whole project. So all of the bus channels have this virtual mix bus. For the drum, I also added this compressor just to add a little compression to it. So all the drums are routed to this bus channel. I also have a plate and room reverb on that channel. For the instrument bus, I have a room reverb, and I have a virtual mix bus. And I have this on the Brit 4K setting for all the mix buses. Okay, so for the pads mix bus, I have the same thing, and a room and a hall reverb. For the effects, I have the same virtual mix bus and a room reverb. I did not use the filter channel at all, and I did not use the filter bypass for this project. I also didn't use the mix bus. These green channels are the VCA channels, so they just adjust the volume for these channels, including reverb. For the master channel, I have an ozonate equalizer with a brick wall at 30 Hz and another one at 18 kilohertz. All right, and now let's get into the instruments. So first off, we have the 808. For the 808 channel, let me open up the instruments as well. So I started off with, in this order, an ozonate imager. So this is my thought process behind this. For the 808, I wanted to take out all of the stereo width and just make it fully mono, so I lowered down all the bars. Then I did a Pro Q from FabFilter, took out a little bit of the low end, a little bit of the high end, and I rose sections here that I felt needed to be raised. After that, I added a decapitator to give it some high-end distortion just a little bit. I only rose up the knob a little bit. And last, I put in a compressor to sidechain the kick to. After I bounced that file to a WAV file, I added a virtual mix rack with the USA preset, the virtual channel, and I also added a custom series lift with a tiny little bit in the low end just to give it that extra bass. Alright, and that's the 808. Alright, so up next we'll do the drums. Alright, so for the drums we'll start with the kick. All the drums are routed to that drum bus channel, as well as the drum VCA, which is down here. Alright, so starting off I put in a FabFilter Pro Q, and this is what I did to it. I also added a virtual channel, which I do for all my instruments on the USA setting. Then after I bounced it, I didn't do anything, so that's all I did for the kick. Alright, for the clap, let's see here. Okay, so I used FG401 compressor, and I have it on the clap smacker setting, the preset. I also used a revival with a little bit of shimmer, and all the way on the thickness. That's for the clap sound. Okay, so for snare A, I did a virtual mix rack. Or hold on a second, guys, I'm sorry, I had the instruments turned off. Let's go back to the clap sound. So for the clap sound, I did a low cut. This is what I did to the clap. And I also had another virtual channel. I was wondering why the virtual channel was missing. That's why I was a little confused. But no, I did have it. It was just before I bounced it. Alright, so now let's go on to that snare. The first snare sound. So the very first thing I did to that snare was a FabFilter low cut, right there. And then I added a virtual mix channel here with the USA setting. Then I bounced it to a wave and I added another virtual mix rack with the custom series equalizer on the big present snare setting, as well as adding some revival and thickness. Alright, so for the second snare, I started with a FabFilter Q with a low cut. Then I added a virtual mix rack. And I did a lot to this one. Standard channel, I added an EQ with the Snare 2 preset, and I adjusted it a little bit. Then I added a custom series lift for a lot of low end and a little bit of high end, as well as a revival for the shimmer and thickness. Okay, then I bounced it, did another low cut, and did another virtual mix rack, so I did a lot to that snare. I did another EQ here, my own little taste, and then a revival with thickness and more shimmer. So up next we have the hi-hat, and I started with a FabFilter Pro Q. Anything to it, it's just I didn't use it. That was a mistake. The next one is my virtual channel I inputted there, and I bounced it to wave. And I put in another virtual mix channel, and I have this EQ. I used the tight hi-hat setting, and I also added a little bit of shimmer and thickness. So after that, I also have an open hat. Whoops. For the open hat, I started with a FabFilter, and I messed up here again. I should have done a low cut, but I didn't. It's not the end of the world though, because there's really not really a lot of low frequency in the hi-hats, so it doesn't really matter. So for that open hat, the standard virtual channel, and once I bounced it to wave, I didn't do anything after that. So here's the perk, which is the last one, and I did a FabFilter. I also messed up here. I forgot to do the low cut, and I put a virtual channel. So let's see. Once I bounced it, I put another virtual channel. So, alright, that's all the drum sounds. Moving on to the piano sounds now. Let me turn these off real quick. Alright, so the piano sounds. First up, we have the chords. For the chords, I have a FabFilter Pro Q with a low cut. Then I put in a virtual mix rack and did quite a bit to it. Same setting, USA. I put in a series equalizer, custom series equalizer, adjusted it. I put in a compressor with the piano smooth preset. And then I added a revival with shimmer and thickness all the way. After that, I put in an Ozone 8 imager with the multiband depth, and I clicked the learn button to adjust it to the sound. Alright, let's see. Next up we have the reverse. And for the reverse, I did a low cut. Then I added a virtual mix rack. Standard settings here, I used a custom series equalizer, custom series lift, and a revival. And then I also put in an Ozone 8 imager with the multiband depth, and I click learn. Okay, so up next we have the 1946 Rhodes. And by the way, these are all routed to the instrument bus channel. So for this one, all I did was a virtual mix rack with the virtual mix channel. So I didn't do anything to the Rhodes. Okay, actually, then I bounced it to wave, and I put another virtual mix rack. And I put in an EQ here. I did a little bit of EQing, took down the low end, added all the way shimmer, a little bit of thickness. Alright, and up next we have the Celeste. For the Celeste, I have the virtual mix rack. Then I bounced it to wave, and I added another one. And I also added an Ozone 8 imager with the spacious high-end preset and the learn button. Alright, that's all the pianos. Now we have the pad sounds. So first pad sound, the only one that I used on this beat, I routed them all to the bus, the pad bus channel, and I did a FabFilter Pro Q. Then after that, I added a virtual mix rack with the standard setting, and an Ozone 8 imager with the multiband depth preset. I also added a hall send here for the hall reverb. After I bounced it to wave, I did an Ozone 8 imager with multiband depth. Then I did another virtual mix rack with some EQing and revival. And another Ozone 8 imager. That's weird. I don't know why I have two. Let me just remove that. Okay, so then I also have the Panman that I showed you earlier, and that's routed to this instrument. Yep. Okay, so alright, those are all the pad sounds. Now let's go on to the Enchanted Flute. For the Enchanted Flute, I started with the low cut fab filter. The Enchanted Flute is also on the instrument bus channel. I used a virtual channel here with the same settings. And I also used an imager with the spacious high-end preset. And that's all I did. After I bounced it, I didn't do anything. Okay, so last we have the effects. So for the riser, I added a virtual mix channel with the standard virtual channel. Then I bounced it to audio and I did nothing else to it. For the beat tag, I added a virtual mix rack with the same settings. And I also put an auto tune with C major scale, and these are the settings that I adjusted. And I do this to keep the beat tag with the same key of the beat. Alright, and all these are routed to the effects bus channel. And that's everything. That's all the mixing that I did. So yeah, that's the beat. And I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you all learned something today. If you guys enjoyed the beat, if you want to purchase it, maybe you want to put some raps on it, maybe you want to be the rapper for the beat, or you want to buy exclusive rights, send me an email. You guys can find that on my website, and you guys can also purchase this beat on my website as well, so come check it out. So with that said, I'll see you guys in the next one, so take care.